When the envelope arrived, it looked like any other piece of mail. No fancy lettering, no return address, just my name in clean, deliberate handwriting. Emily Catherine Langford. No one had called me that in years. Not since the funeral. It had been almost 3 years since Mom passed away. 3 years of carefully curated distance between me and everything that still ached. I lived in Boston now, working as an assistant at a boutique consulting firm while finishing my degree remotely. My life was simple, structured, and most importantly, mine. But the letter shattered all that. I opened it at the kitchen table, a mug of lukewarm coffee forgotten beside me. The paper was thick and smelled faintly of lavender, Mom's scent. It was a single sheet, written in her unmistakable cursive, elegant and precise. Emily, if you're reading this, then something has gone wrong. I hope it hasn't. I hope you're reading this after a long, beautiful life, and this letter is just an artifact of a mother's overcautious heart. But if not, if my absence was sudden, or if things don't make sense, please don't let it go. The truth is buried beneath everything your father will say. Find the lockbox. You know the one. With all my love, Mom. I read it 3 times. By the 4th, my hands were trembling. There was only one lockbox she could have meant. The small brass, one she kept under her vanity, always tucked away beneath a false drawer panel. As a child, I'd seen her open it only once, quickly snapping it shut when I walked in. I remembered asking about it, and I remembered her pause, the rare kind of silence that signaled a line not to be crossed. But I wasn't a child anymore. I packed that same evening and took the last train to Connecticut. Dad had never sold the house. He couldn't. It was too intertwined with her memory, too steeped in prestige to let go. The Langford estate was one of those grand, ivy-wrapped homes you see in glossy magazines. But beneath the polished surface was a family story no one in the town dared to speak aloud. When I pulled up in the Uber, the house looked dark. Cold. The way places do when their soul has moved on. I let myself in using the old code. The alarm chirped in recognition, and I stood for a moment just inside the foyer, listening. Silence. No sign of Dad. Probably out at the club or in the city. Good. The air inside smelled faintly of mahogany and something else. Maybe rose water, maybe memory. I went straight to her vanity, past the bedroom that had remained untouched since the day of the funeral. My fingers moved with certainty I didn't know I still had, finding the hidden catch beneath the drawer. The panel lifted with a quiet click. The box was still there. I held it for a moment, hesitant, heart pounding. Then I pulled it open. Inside were documents, handwritten notes, printouts of emails, photos, even financial statements. Each item was labeled in her meticulous handwriting. At the very bottom, a USB drive, wrapped in a monogrammed silk handkerchief. Something shifted inside me as I began flipping through the contents. The dates stretched back over a decade. Some of the documents referenced the company, Langford Equity, and others bore names I didn't recognize. But there was one name that kept appearing. Cassandra Blythe. I froze. That name I knew. She had been my mother's assistant, bright, ambitious, and always too close to my father. After Mom's death, she'd somehow become a fixture at his side. A consultant, he said. She'd even moved into the guest house. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. A photograph slid out from between 2 pages. It showed my father and Cassandra at a corporate retreat in Monaco, his hand on the small of her back, both of them smiling far too intimately. The date. 2 years before Mom died. The air around me shifted. I turned back to the USB, plugged it into my laptop, and found a series of audio files labeled by date. I clicked on the first one. This is Catherine Langford. Entry 1. If anything happens to me, this is my record. Her voice. Calm. Controlled. But there was something else beneath it. Fear. The recording cut off after 5 minutes. I stared at the screen, the words still ringing in my ears. This wasn't grief anymore. This was a breadcrumb trail. And I'd just taken the first step into something far bigger than I'd ever imagined. I wasn't ready, but I wasn't turning back either. I barely slept that night. The house creaked with old bones, radiators murmuring in the walls, pipes groaning as if mourning. I curled up on the same twin bed I'd had in high school, unable to shake the voice in my head. Mom's voice. Calm, restrained, and so unlike the warmth I remembered. That recording, it had the weight of someone who had already accepted she was walking into danger. And yet, she hadn't run. I spent the next morning cataloging every item in the lockbox. There were 36 documents, each labeled with short notations. Private transfer, Cayman account. Board override vote, March 2016. Email to Cassandra, no timestamp. The majority were financial in nature, but layered within were subtle clues. Details about meetings that hadn't been on the official calendar, texts forwarded from unknown numbers, even medication logs. It became quickly apparent that my mother had been doing more than managing a household and attending charity luncheons. She had been keeping records, investigating, preparing for something, or someone. There was one item that stood out, a printed lab report dated just 4 months before her death. The letterhead was from a private toxicology firm in New Jersey. The results were heavily redacted, but the chemical names I could read were chilling. I didn't know what most of them meant, but one stood out. Thallium. My heart thudded. Thallium. A heavy metal. Tasteless. Odorless. Infamously used in poisonings throughout history. I Googled it in a daze, my fingers trembling over the keyboard. Hair loss. Nausea. Neurological symptoms. The same things Mom had suffered during her cancer. But the hospital's diagnosis had been aggressive ovarian carcinoma. No mention of toxins. No toxicology screens. Why would there be? The narrative had been tightly controlled. I sat back in my chair and stared at the papers spread across the bed like a map of buried secrets. If she'd suspected poisoning, why hadn't she gone to the police? Why leave breadcrumbs instead? Unless she didn't trust them. Or worse, she didn't trust anyone. The weight of that thought settled in my chest. I suddenly felt very alone in a very large, silent house. And then I heard a sound. A click. The unmistakable snap of the front door unlocking. I froze. There had been no car in the driveway, no voices on the porch. I quickly closed the laptop, stuffed the papers back into the box, and slid it into my duffel. I moved fast, quietly, and ducked into the hallway just as the door swung open. It was Dad. Of course it was. He stepped into the foyer in a tailored coat, scarf neatly tucked, and gloves in hand. He looked exactly the same. Tall, composed, the kind of man people deferred to without question. His silver hair was impeccably styled, his leather shoes silent against the marble floor. But his eyes scanned the house like a man returning to a crime scene. "Emily," he said, startled. "I didn't know you were coming." "Last minute," I said, keeping my voice even. "Felt like visiting home." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Home? Haven't heard you call it that in a while." I didn't answer. Instead, I watched him as he stepped into the living room, glancing at everything and nothing at once. He moved like someone taking inventory, checking what had changed, what had been touched. He knew. Not everything, but something. "Staying long?" he asked over his shoulder. "Just the weekend," I lied. "Alone?" I nodded. He gave a small, noncommittal hum, then turned toward the kitchen. "I'll fix us some coffee." The moment he was out of sight, I pulled out my phone and texted my friend Maya, my only confidant from school and a law student with a good nose for trouble. "Emily, found something. It's big. Can't talk here. We'll explain soon." I dropped the phone back in my pocket just as Dad reappeared with 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one and sat across from me on the couch. I forced a smile and took a sip. It tasted fine. "I'm sorry about everything," he said suddenly, eyes searching mine. I blinked. "What do you mean?" He exhaled. "About your mother. About how it all ended. You should have heard more from me. I should have made space for your grief." I studied him. The words were right, but the tone was performative, like someone playing a role. "I always felt she kept things from me," I said carefully. "Even at the end." His brow furrowed. "Like what?" "I don't know. Maybe she was scared." He paused, just for a second. "She was sick, Emily. That kind of illness changes people. It makes them paranoid, confused." I nodded slowly, and then I dropped the match. "She left me a letter." His smile barely faltered. "Did she?" "Yeah, just a few lines. Told me to find something." "Find what?" "A lockbox." He stiffened. "It was slight. A tightening around the mouth, a glance that lasted half a second too long, but it was there. I smiled sweetly. You remember it, right? I vaguely recall something like that, he said. Your mother kept a lot of mementos. She was sentimental, but he was already calculating. I could see it. Mind if I go freshen up? I asked. Of course not. I stood and walked upstairs, heart pounding, ears alert for any movement behind me. Once in my old bedroom, I locked the door, stuffed the box into my backpack, and began planning my exit. I couldn't stay here. Not another night. I pulled out my phone again and texted Maya. Emily, need your help. Meet me tomorrow. Bring your legal brain. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and tried not to cry. Because my father was a liar. Because my mother had died afraid. Because I had just stepped into something dark and dangerous, and I didn't know if I was ready. But I would be. The next morning, I left before sunrise. I slipped out while Dad was still asleep, or pretending to be. Either way, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't just settle, but watches. I'd felt it pressing down on me all night, a kind of invisible weight. Like Mom's spirit wasn't at peace, like something was still unfinished. I didn't look back as I drove away. Not at the heavy black gates. Not at the rose trellis where she used to read. Not at the room where she died. I met Maya at a diner in New Haven, a half-hour drive from the estate. She was already there, waiting in a corner booth with her laptop open and legal pads stacked around her like a fortress. Sharp, brilliant, and loyal to a fault, Maya was the one person I trusted enough to show everything to. You look like hell, she said as I slid into the booth. I feel worse, I replied, setting the lockbox beside her. Ready for a rabbit hole? She raised an eyebrow. Hit me. For the next 2 hours, I laid it all out. Mom's letter, the documents, the strange toxicology report, the financial transfers, and the way Dad had looked at me last night like he already knew what I had. Maya read through every page like a surgeon dissecting tissue, making margin notes, cross-referencing account numbers with public records. Her hand slowed when she got to the Cayman account transfer. This isn't just shady, she murmured. This is criminal. I sipped lukewarm coffee. Define criminal. She tapped her pen against the table. Embezzlement. Fraud. Wire transfers in someone else's name, your mother's. These weren't even authorized by the board. At least not officially. It's a shell game. You think he set her up? I think, she said carefully, he was hiding money in her name, so if it ever came back to him, she'd take the fall. But she found out, and started documenting everything. Maya leaned in, lowering her voice. Emily, your mother wasn't just preparing a case. She was planning to bring him down. I swallowed hard. Then why didn't she? She looked at me like the answer was obvious. Because she died. The weight of that truth pressed against my chest. I think she left the rest to me, I whispered. Maya nodded. Then we need to be smart. Strategic. We don't go to the police yet. Your father's powerful, and if he's already circling, he might have people watching. We need more proof. Real proof. I hesitated. I think I know where to look. Mom's old email. She kept a private laptop, a rose gold MacBook that always sat on the antique writing desk in the sunroom. Dad hated that desk. Said it was a waste of good space. But Mom had been fiercely territorial about it. She locked the drawers and used the sunroom as her sanctuary. If she'd kept records digitally, that's where they'd be. I would have to go back. That night, I drove to the estate again. Not through the front gate, but around the back trail near the woods. I used to sneak in that way as a teenager after curfew. Some things never change. The house was mostly dark. Dad must have been out, or asleep again. I crept around to the sunroom's French doors and used the old trick with a credit card to pop the lock. Once inside, I moved quickly. The desk was still there, covered in a dust cloth. I peeled it off and opened the center drawer. Nothing. The side drawers were locked. I reached for the underside of the middle drawer. I remembered something. Mom once showed me a trick. A magnetic release. My fingers found the latch, and the bottom popped open with a soft click. There it was. Her laptop. Still intact. Still clean. I turned it on, praying the password wasn't some long-forgotten code. It wasn't. I typed, Camellia 1959, her favorite flower and her birth year. The screen unlocked. Emails, folders, notes. all organized, all dated. My breath caught when I saw one folder titled simply, "If something happens to me." I opened it. Inside were recordings, audio files, labeled by date, scans of letters, screenshots of texts, an entire thread titled Cassandra Leverage, and one document that sent ice into my veins. Will /_draft /_confidential / and signed.pdf. I clicked it open. It was a version of my mother's will I had never seen. In this draft, she left the entirety of her shares in the family company to me. Not to Dad. Not jointly. Solely to me. She had also included a clause removing Dad as executor, naming instead a firm in New York. This draft had never been finalized. Never notarized. But it existed, and someone had known about it. My pulse thundered in my ears. I copied every file onto a flash drive I brought with me and tucked the laptop back in place. I was about to leave when I heard the noise. A low creak. Not from upstairs. Not from the hall. From inside the sunroom. I turned slowly. Dad stood in the doorway. In the shadows. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice calm and eerily neutral. I didn't answer. He stepped closer. "You shouldn't be here." I could say the same. He stared at me. The silence between us stretched, tight like a violin string about to snap. "I warned your mother not to go down this path," he said quietly. "She didn't listen." "She died," I said. "She didn't just disappear. She died, Dad." He tilted his head. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I took a step back. My hand gripped the flash drive in my pocket like a talisman. "You always underestimate me," I said. And then I walked past him. Out the room. Out the house. Out into the night. He didn't follow. But his words followed me all the way to Maya's apartment. "Be careful what truths you dig up. You might not like what you find." The city felt different now. Colder, louder, sharper. Like the world was suddenly more dangerous because I had proof, real, undeniable proof, and that made me a threat. Not just to my father, but to anyone who had helped him. By the time I arrived at Maya's apartment, it was nearly 2 a.m. She buzzed me in without a word. I climbed the stairs with the flash drive burning a hole in my coat pocket, heart pounding with adrenaline and exhaustion. She didn't ask questions when I walked in. Just handed me tea and opened her laptop. We plugged the drive in and watched the files load. "I've never seen anything like this," she said quietly. "Your mom documented everything. This isn't just emotional. This is surgical. She was building a case." Maya nodded. "And she wasn't just after your dad." I blinked. "What?" She named names, "Look at this email chain, see that?" She pointed to the screen. A memo sent from my father's corporate account to an anonymous address, then forwarded to someone with a familiar name. Aunt Lydia, my mother's older sister. A woman who had always acted warm, doting, and harmless. She made casseroles for board meetings and sent handwritten birthday cards. But she had also sat on the company's ethics committee for over a decade. She'd been my father's trusted confidant for just as long. She was in on it, Maya said. Or at the very least, she knew. I stared at the screen. Why would she do that? Maya clicked a few more folders. Money. Your dad shifted partial ownership of a dummy consulting firm to her name 6 months before your mom's diagnosis. They funneled funds through it. I sank onto the couch. He bought her silence. Maya nodded. And the files show she wasn't the only one. We stayed up all night, mapping out names, timelines, paper trails. It was all there, buried under layers of misdirection, coded language, and offshore accounts. And the deeper we went, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a toxic marriage. It was a coordinated takedown. A quiet coup. By dawn, we had compiled a list of 6 insiders. All either executives or board adjacent. All with something to lose. One of them, however, didn't fit. Peter Crane, head of legal. A man who had worked under my father for over 20 years, yet had surprisingly little communication in the files. No offshore links. No payouts. Just a few odd emails from my mother, direct, candid, almost friendly. Look at this, Maya said. She wrote to him a month before she died. Asterisk, Peter, if anything happens to me, please remember the folder we discussed. You told me you would know when the time was right. This is it. Tell her what you told me. See asterisk. She trusted him, I said. Maya pulled up a contact number. So do we call him? No, I said. We go see him. Crane's office was in the financial district. Sleek, glassy corporate. We arrived late in the afternoon, dressed professionally, trying to look like just another legal consult instead of two women unraveling a scandal that could level half the board. The receptionist raised an eyebrow when I gave my name. Do you have an appointment? No. But tell him I'm Charlotte Dawson's daughter. That got his attention. Within minutes, we were ushered into a corner office with high ceilings and an unnerving view of the skyline. Peter Crane looked exactly like I remembered. Silver hair, immaculate suit, eyes that missed nothing. He didn't offer pleasantries. Just looked at me and said, "You're early." My spine stiffened. "Early!" He gestured for us to sit. "Your mother told me one day you'd come. She said you'd find her letter, and that you'd figure out what really happened. I just didn't think it'd be this soon." My voice was dry. "You knew she suspected something." "I knew she had proof. She came to me 6 months before she passed. Wanted advice. I told her the truth, that she'd never get justice through the board. Too many hands were dirty. She'd have to build something airtight and get you to deliver it. She told you to keep a folder." Crane stood and unlocked a hidden drawer behind a cabinet. From inside, he withdrew a leather binder and placed it gently on the table. Everything she gave me. Originals, witness testimonies, private correspondence, audio files, including one from the night before her last hospital visit. I froze. "You mean?" He nodded grimly. "I don't know what's on it. I never listened. But she said it was the final piece. Said you'd understand when you heard it." My hands shook as I took the USB drive from the folder. We didn't stay. We left with the binder, caught the elevator in silence, and returned to Maya's apartment like fugitives carrying a bomb. The file was named Final Recording /_Charlotte.m4a. It was nearly 5 minutes long. I pressed play. Asterisk, Emily, if you're hearing this, then you found it. I don't know how long I have, and I don't know if this will ever reach you. But I need you to know I was right. Your father is trying to make it look like the cancer is progressing faster than it should. I've been recording symptoms. There are discrepancies. And he knows I've found them. Asterisk. Asterisk, he switched my medication. I'm sure of it. I labeled the bottles. I hid samples in the vanity. Maybe someone can test them one day. But I think he knows what I'm planning to do. Asterisk. Asterisk, if I don't survive the week, know this. I did not give up. I did not stay silent. And I am not afraid of him. Asterisk. Asterisk. Emily, the company will come for you. They'll try to twist this. Bury it. Bury me. Don't let them. Take everything. Don't just survive this. Take it all back. Asterisk. The recording ended with a faint, trembling breath. We sat in stunned silence. I have to act now, I said, before he finds out how much I know. Maya looked at me. What are you going to do? I stood. I'm going to take the company. What came next was a delicate war. We drafted a formal motion for an emergency board meeting, citing concerns about corporate governance, financial misconduct, and fiduciary violations. I used my voting shares, small but significant, to call it legally. Crane agreed to represent me. Dad tried to block it. He called me at 2 a.m., his voice smooth and terrifyingly calm. I underestimated you, he said, but you're not ready for this. Neither were you when you betrayed her. A pause. Don't make this worse than it has to be. We can find a solution. Quietly. I don't want quiet. I hung up. 3 days later, I walked into the boardroom not as a grieving daughter, but as a storm. And I had everything. They said the boardroom hadn't changed in 20 years. Same polished walnut table. Same oil paintings of past CEOs glaring from the walls. Same massive bay windows overlooking the city, a view my father once referred to as his throne. This time, he wasn't sitting at the head of the table. I was. The room was packed. The full board, legal counsel, advisors, and Peter Crane at my right. Dad walked in 10 minutes late, his usual arrogance barely hiding the twitch in his jaw when he saw me already in place. Quite the power move, he muttered as he took the opposite seat. I didn't reply. I opened the binder. Crane called the meeting to order. The board, a blend of senior executives, family shareholders, and strategic partners, expected a routine vote. At most, a leadership challenge. They had no idea what was coming. "I appreciate you all being here," I began, voice steady. "This meeting is not about succession planning. It's about accountability. I have evidence of long-standing ethical violations by current leadership, including fraudulent accounting practices, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty." A ripple of shock moved across the room. Dad narrowed his eyes. "You're making serious accusations without basis." I cut him off. "I have recordings, internal communications, and documented testimony. All of it will be made available after this meeting. But for now," I slid a copy of the USB drive to each board member. "This is what my mother was working on before her death. She was systematically documenting irregularities in company finances, evidence that implicates not only the current CEO, but several members of this board." Silence. Then came the questions. What kind of irregularities? Where did this information come from? How do we know any of it's real? Crane answered methodically, unfazed. "The materials were gathered by Charlotte Dawson over 2 years. The original documents are authenticated. Several were retrieved from protected archives and verified by forensic accountants. The statute of limitations has not expired on most of these violations." Dad was still. Too still. Then he laughed softly. "You think this is going to work?" he asked. "This is a smear campaign from a child who can't handle losing her mother and needs someone to blame. You don't know what it takes to run a company like this. The pressure, the strategy." "The lies," I said. His gaze snapped back to me. "You said I'd never understand," I went on. "But I understand perfectly now. I understand how you built your empire on exploitation. I understand how you manipulated the trust of everyone who believed in you, including her." I pressed a button on the small speaker beside me. Charlotte's final recording filled the boardroom like a ghost had walked in. The room went cold. Some of the board members looked away. One, a woman named Trina Patel, who'd been on the executive team since before I was born, began quietly crying. The moment the audio ended, everything shifted. Crane stood. "In light of this evidence, and pursuant to the emergency powers granted by Article 9 of the bylaws, we are calling for a vote of no confidence in the current CEO and a proposal for immediate suspension pending formal investigation." My father's face drained of color. "Emily," he said, with forced calm, "think about what this will do to the company, to our name, to you." I stared at him. "This isn't about a name. This is about my mother." The vote was unanimous. He was removed that afternoon. But the fallout had only begun. I spent the next 72 hours in what felt like a war bunker. Meetings, statements, emergency restructuring. Our PR team crafted a narrative of family succession and internal review, vague enough to avoid legal landmines, clear enough to signal change. But behind closed doors, it was chaos. 3 board members resigned within a week. One, Aunt Lydia, didn't go quietly. She showed up at my office uninvited. "You think you're some kind of avenger," she hissed, slamming a manila envelope onto my desk. "You're just a girl playing with fire." "I have fire insurance," I said, sliding the envelope toward me. Inside were legal threats, preemptive lawsuits, accusations of defamation. "I know about the offshore firm," I said calmly. "About the $2.4 million wired to your shell account in Malta. I'm guessing the IRS would find that very interesting." Her face paled. "You can either walk away or be dragged out. Your choice." She walked. That night, I stood in my father's old office, now mine, staring out over the skyline he once claimed. The silence was deafening, until a knock came at the door. It was Crane. "You need to see this," he said. He handed me a slim envelope, sealed in wax. No address, just a single letter scrawled on the front, E. Inside was a photo, a faded Polaroid. My mother, smiling. Younger than I'd ever seen her, holding a baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. Me. No. The eyes were different. Darker. "What is this?" I whispered. "There's more," Crane said gently. He passed me a document, a notarized birth certificate. Name, Isabel Charlotte Dawson. Date of birth, August 7th, 1993. "Your mother had a child before she married your father," Crane said. "She gave her up. Your father never knew. My vision blurred. Where is she now? Crane hesitated. That's the thing. She's been trying to contact you. For weeks. Under a different name. I shook my head, overwhelmed. What name? He looked at me, gravely. Cassandra. The name hit me like a brick. Dad's young wife. The one who disappeared when the investigation started. The woman I had suspected, despised, and almost had arrested. My sister. I couldn't feel my hands. Crane's words kept echoing in my mind like a cruel riddle. Cassandra was my sister? Everything tilted sideways. Memories, conversations, glares exchanged across polished marble floors, reinterpreted in an instant. The secrets, the way she taunted me, the flashes of knowing in her eyes. She hadn't been mocking me. She had been testing me. I barely remembered leaving the office. The envelope was clutched in my fingers as I staggered to the elevator, down to the garage. I don't know how I got to the condo. We kept Cassandra in under company surveillance. But when the door opened, and she saw me standing there, something in her face changed. Not surprise. Recognition. You're early, she said softly. You knew, I said. All this time. Why didn't you tell me? Cassandra walked slowly to the kitchenette and poured herself a glass of water. She didn't offer me one. She took a long sip, then leaned against the counter like we were two sisters catching up after years apart. I wasn't sure if you deserved to know, she said. That stopped me cold. You think I haven't been through enough. She gave me a cold, appraising look. You had her. I didn't. I said nothing. Because what could I say? Cassandra finally sighed. I was adopted at birth. Mom left a letter, and the agency told me the basics. For years, I didn't want to know more. Then I read about Charlotte Dawson in a business magazine. Recognized her face. Found out she had a daughter. You, and a husband. She paused. Figured he might owe me something. I stepped closer. So you married him. Don't make it sound dirty, she snapped. I didn't plan it that way. I infiltrated. That's what you do when you've been left behind. You find a way in, and he was so easy to manipulate. So desperate for youth, admiration, validation. The revulsion on my face must have been clear. She looked amused. I wanted what was mine, she said. A piece of the empire our mother built. But then I realized he didn't build it. You did. Quietly. Relentlessly. Just like her. I swallowed hard. Why didn't you tell me the truth once you were inside? Her smile faded. Because I thought you'd hate me. There it was. Finally. Something real. I sat down on the arm of the couch, heart pounding. I still might, I said quietly. But maybe less than I did yesterday. Silence stretched between us. Is this why you helped Dad siphon money? I asked. Why you disappeared? Cassandra shook her head. No. That part, that was me losing the plot. I got too deep, too greedy. I thought I could control him. But your father's rot ran deeper than I knew. When I tried to pull back, he threatened me. He threatened me, I said bitterly. He always knew where to aim. We stared at each other, strangers. Sisters. Pieces of the same woman. Finally I spoke. You're not going to jail. Not if you cooperate. But you're done here. You'll work under the board's supervision on probation. No salary. No access to accounts. No secrets. Cassandra nodded slowly. Fair. One more thing, I added. You'll give me the rest of the letters. The one she wrote to you. I want to know everything, she said. She hesitated, then walked to the bedroom and returned with a small box. Inside, 5 handwritten letters, each signed Love, Mom. She handed them over. No drama. No words. As I turned to leave, she stopped me. Do you think she would have loved me? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw in her face the same cheekbones, the same sharpness, the same grief. The question pierced something deep. She already did, I said. She gave you away to protect you. Then I left. A month later, I stood over my mother's grave again, a single wildflower in my hand, her letters in my purse. I still hadn't read them. I wasn't ready. The company was stable. Profits recovering. My father had signed a binding agreement relinquishing all voting rights in exchange for his pension. He now lived alone, stripped of his influence, still trying to smile through the humiliation. Cassandra worked in a satellite office in Boston. Quiet. Professional. Her name erased from every public listing. We hadn't spoken since that night. Not directly, but every Mother's Day, she sent a single photograph. The same one. Mom, smiling in the garden. No note. No explanation. It was enough. 6 months later, I received a final letter, no return address. Inside was a single photo. Cassandra standing in front of a house I didn't recognize, holding a baby, smiling. Whole. On the back, 4 words in careful handwriting. She gets another chance. I stared at it for a long time, and smiled,